Rogue Squadron is possibly the most memorable fighter squadron in all of Star Wars. This transmission is going to cover every pilot to have an official roster slot within the squadron from both Canon and Legends. We're going to start with the Canon roster. It is much shorter. First, Rogue Leader. It was consciously decided to retire the call sign Rogue One in honor of Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, and the other brave rebels who made defeating the Death Star possible. Hero of the Rebellion, Luke Skywalker is a naturally gifted pilot who more than proved his worth by firing the killing blow against the Death Star. Skywalker was the first pilot to take up the mantle Rogue Leader. Skywalker flies under this call sign during the Battle of Hoth. Then he takes a leave from the fleet to continue his Jedi training. Wedge Antilles would pick up the call sign next. Wedge was a dedicated rebel pilot who served all the way through the end of the Galactic Civil War. He trained new pilots for the New Republic. Rogue 2. Isla Mantra is credited with flying as Rogue 2 against the Imperial shipyard over Terrace. This battle takes place before the Battle of Hoth, as Rogue Squadron was officially formed for the Battle of Mako Ta. Zev Seneska is the pilot who rescues Luke and Han on Hoth. He would adopt the call sign next. He flies bravely during the Battle of Hoth, but was killed by an Imperial walker. The call sign was never filled again after Seneska's death. Rogue 3. Wedge Antilles is the only pilot that I could find to be called Rogue 3. He uses this during the Battle of Hoth. He and his gunner Wes Jansen worked together to take down an AT-AT, or an AT-AT, walking tank. After Wedge was promoted to Rogue Leader, this call sign went unused. Rogue 4. Lyle Cullen was the first pilot to take on the call sign of Rogue 4 during the Terrace shipyard attack. Cullen was actually an undercover Imperial agent whose attempt at sabotaging this mission failed. Derek Hobby Clivian brought honor back to this call sign during the Battle of Hoth. He sacrifices himself when he crashes into the Imperial AT-AT Blizzard 1 that contained General Veers, who was leading the ground assault for the Empire. Jackson T. Tumperaki is the most bizarre pilot on this list. B. Smuggler turned mercenary flew as Rogue 4 for the New Republic. Ibti Myrock was recruited into Rogue Squadron as a rookie. His first combat assignment was the attack on the Terrace shipyards. He was almost killed by an ally as an overzealous squad mate broke formation to pursue some TIE fighters. Rogue 6. Samak Far flies against the Empire at the Battle of Hoth. Her snowspeeder is shot down, but her death isn't confirmed. It is possible she survived the battle and evacuated the base. Rogue 7. Nala Hetseem also flies a snowspeeder at Hoth. He and his gunner, Cinda Tarheel, fight bravely against the Empire and were a rare pairing that made it through that battle. An unnamed pilot flies as Rogue 8 to defend the rebel fleet at Mako Ta. This pilot was killed by the Empire when they caught up to the fleeing rebellion. Rogue 9 is mentioned as a call sign, but I couldn't uncover any information specifically about a pilot or specific mission. Rogue 10 and 11. I don't have a name, but a pilot is serving under Rogue 10 on Hoth. This pilot, along with Rogue 11, were assigned to a remote sensor outpost, Echo Station 3-T-8. They were the early warning signal of the Imperial attack. Rogue 12 is also mentioned as a call sign, but again, I could not uncover any information on a pilot or specific mission. That's the full Rogue Squadron from Canon. The Legends bench is far deeper. Rogue Leader, or Rogue One. Luke Skywalker founded Rogue Flight after the Battle of Yavin along with Wedge Antilles. They filled most of the pilot positions by Red Squadron pilots who made it through the Battle of Yavin. Rogue Flight takes on many combat missions early in the Galactic Civil War, notably the Battle of Hoth. Skywalker would leave the group to pursue his Jedi training, but would occasionally return to help the Rogues on a difficult mission. Just for clarification, when I say rebel pilots that survived the Battle of Yavin, there were more pilots than they had ships. So there were a lot of pilots in reserve left back at the Massassi ruins who were not flying up against the Death Star, as very few made it out of the actual encounter. If you're getting value or entertainment out of any of my transmissions, it would mean a lot if you would join the Remnant and subscribe. Despite Skywalker's infamy, Wedge Antilles would become the most famous rogue commander. He was Luke's second during the Jedi's tenure and takes over the call sign. He reforms the group to be an X-Wing squadron after Hoth and again after Endor, since in that battle, the Rogues flew once again as Red Squadron. He makes sure that Rogue Group becomes an elite squadron for the Rebel Alliance and then the New Republic. Under his command, the Rogues take on superweapons, warlords, and liberated Coruscant. He even turns down military promotions to remain with his squadron. Derek Hobby Clivian became an instructor and second-in-command to Antilles after the Battle of Hoth. In ABY-7, Hobby would be the interim leader when Antilles needed to step away and form Wraith Squadron. When Tycho Celchu was given command of the squadron, Hobby agreed to be his deputy, meaning that he would take over lead whenever Celchu was unable to fly. His crash with the AT-AT Walker on Hoth did not kill him, and he eventually recovers from those injuries to fly with the Rogues again. Tycho Celchu was a native Alderaanian. He defects from the Empire for obvious reasons and joins the Rebellion. He starts with Rogue Group as Rogue 5. He takes over as Red Leader for a time after the Bacta War, when Antilles steps away from combat duties. Gavin Darklighter, cousin of Biggs Darklighter, who died flying against the Death Star, joined at just 16 years old in ABY-6. He flies as Rogue 5 and rises through the ranks into the war with the Yuuzhan Vong in ABY-25. He's eventually promoted to leader and keeps that position well into the Legacy of the Force era. Former Coruscant pilot and eventual Jedi Corran Horn starts his time with the Rogues as Rogue 9. This was during the liberation of Coruscant. His long and reliable service with the squadron and his time training under Skywalker to be a Jedi Knight lead him to being given command of the Rogues for a brief time. Jaina Solo joins the Rogues during the Yuuzhan Vong War. She flies with other groups prior to this and was already an ace pilot. In ABY-28, she's promoted to leader to deal with the difficult war campaign at Borealis. She serves briefly before leaving to join an all-Jedi fighter squadron. Jumping all the way to ABY-130, Lensi serves as Rogue Leader. Lensi serves the Galactic Alliance remnant against the forces of Darth Krayt. Lensi is killed during the Second Battle of Mon Calamari. Jorman Bay was a long-surviving rogue who takes up the mantle in ABY-137 after Lensi's death. Anj Dal is the last known rogue leader in Legends continuity. She's a human pilot who serves through the final stages of the war with Darth Krayt. Her tenure ensured Rogue Squadron was a beacon of hope over a century after the group's formation. Rogue 2. Zev Seneska serves as Rogue 2, flying as Skywalker's wingman during the Battle of Hoth. He was killed later in the battle, covering the rebels' evacuation. Will Scotian was recruited by Antilles after Hoth. He serves the Rebellion at Oracle Base prior to this and was chosen for his excellent combat record. He flies with the all-X-Wing version of Rogue Squadron in battles like Gaul and Bakaru. Dlur Nep joins after the Battle of Endor. He's a strong pilot, but also a talented musician. He'd use his music to boost squadron morale. During a battle on Corpul against a Sith cult, Nep sacrifices himself to save his squadmates. Peshk Vrisik is a Bothan pilot who flies as Rogue 2 briefly in the efforts to liberate Coruscant. His time in the squadron has them using B-Wings. Vrisik is shot down by Imperial forces, one of many in this period of high turnover for the squadron. Rogue 3. Antilles starts his time with Rogue Squadron as Rogue 3. He's primarily known for being the long-serving and well-liked leader of the group. Tycho Celchu serves under a couple of call signs in his time with the squadron, but most commonly he's Rogue 3. He's a reliable pilot who is known for keeping a level head in trying times. Eventually, he'd take up training new recruits. Plor Otto started her life as a princess on the planet Iatu 6. She joins Rogue Squadron after the Battle of Endor and was known for her aggressive flying style. She takes a brief hiatus from serving to lead her homeworld, but in time, she would return to the New Republic military. Rogue 4. Derek Hobby Clivian was the first Rogue 4. He flies under the call sign at Hoth, with Kesset Amis as his gunner. He would sometimes fly as Rogue 3, but when Skywalker would return as Rogue Leader for various missions, it shifted the members' call signs down a level, which is incredibly confusing. Kesset Omis shared the call sign with Hobby, as the call signs are given to the craft being piloted, not the individual pilot. While Hobby survives the crash against General Veers Walker in Legends, Amis was not so lucky. Rizadi Yinner joins in ABY-6 after the Battle of Endor. She's known for her positive attitude and performs admirably during the liberation of Coruscant. She's killed in the next major conflict, the Bacta War, a year later. Nrin Vakil joins the squadron after the liberation of Coruscant, where heavy losses were taken. He's an expert dogfighter, that is starfighter to starfighter combat, and forms a romantic relationship with fellow pilot Ibitsam. Nrin is a Corran and Ibitsam is a Mon Calamari. The two peoples have a contentious history, making this something of a Romeo and Juliet romance. Rogue 5. Tycho Celchu flies as Rogue 5 during the Battle of Hoth. His gunner was Tar Missin before he switches over to an X-Wing to escort rebel transport ships fleeing the planet. He would go on to lead Rogue Squadron. Tarn Missin shared the call sign with Celchu, as I just mentioned. He was killed on Hoth when their speeder is shot down. The fallen members of Rogue Squadron in this conflict are memorialized on a wall aboard the capital ship of Home 1. Gavin Darklighter flies as Rogue 5 after Endor. Being a new recruit, he takes on a support role in the squadron. He serves a long time with valor and becomes a senior member. He would one day lead the squadron, but always kept 5 painted on his helmet. Dix Riven hails from Corellia. He joins the Rogues after Hoth. He was a risk-taker who would always have to be reined in by his commanding officers. He survives the Battle of Endor, but died soon after in a skirmish with Imperial forces. The post-Endor time saw a lot of casualties for Rogue Squadron. Lujane Forge was one of the first new members when Antilles reforms the squadron after Endor. She's the first daughter of the leader of an earlier rebel cell. She's kind and patient and helped new recruits, like Gavin Darklighter, adjust to their new role. She's killed when Imperial forces assault the rebel base on Antilles, Rogue 6. Wes Jansen was loved by his squadmates for his sense of humor and quick wit. He serves as Antilles' gunner, sharing his call sign. He then begins flying solo as Rogue 6 after Endor. He trains recruits for Rogue Squadron and helps Antilles with Wraith Squadron as well. Vigrat Pomaner was the gunner for Samak Far's speeder at Hoth. When their speeder went down, Far survived but Pomaner died. He's memorialized on the wall of fallen Rogue Squadron pilots. Riv Shiel served the second flight of Rogue Squadron under Ryzadi Yinner's leadership. This is after Endor. He is killed while on a routine patrol by Imperial TIE fighters. Antilles honored him in death, giving him credit for saving his squadmates by drawing enemy fire. Asir Sylar was a Bothan pilot who joins Rogue Squadron during the Bacta War. She proves her worth during the battle to reclaim Typhera. She continues serving through the war against the reborn Emperor. She would fake her own death to work as a secret rebel spy not long after. Rogue 7. Nala Hetsim pilots a speeder on Hoth with Synda Tarheel as his gunner. He survives the battle, but was killed not long after while rebel forces were forced to evacuate their medical frigate, Redemption. Synda Tarheel also survived Hoth. She's injured in a future mission and couldn't fly. Instead of waiting around in a medbay, she becomes the flight controller. She was able to still serve the squadron in this capacity, but was kept out of harm's way as she could no longer do combat missions. Ryzadi Yinner proves herself as an asset as Rogue 4 and was reassigned to Rogue 7 when she was also given lead of Rogue's 2 flight. She's praised as a leader. She marries fellow pilot Noara Ven, but was sadly killed in the Bacta War just weeks after their wedding. LSR Targon joins the Rogues for the war against the Yuuzhan Vong. He is the squadron's joker, which brings levity when the pilots needed it the most. He serves well into the New Republic era. Rogue 8. Vekozev Kybir shares the call sign with Stax Milani during the Battle of Hoth. Kybir piloting and Milani gunning. The two are shot down in their airspeeder. Their names are included on the memorial wall. Broro Jace was a skilled Typheran pilot who was one of the first in the newly reformed group post-Endor. He flies with the group for a long time, but at one point feigns his death while battling Imperial intelligence officer Yazan Azard. He continues serving Rogue Squadron under the alias Kurtin Delarit. He would take his name back and help Rogue Squadron's final battle over his homeworld, Typhera. He then retires to help his home regrow their Bacta stores. Ibitsam was a female Mon Calamari pilot who joins the newly formed squadron. She's given a hard time as Mon Cals weren't seen as capable starfighter pilots. She proves her worth in many battles before sacrificing her life to stop a Sith artifact from spreading malice on Kiva. Rogue 9. Stephen McKintay started his life in privilege. He was the heir to a noble family when he feels the call to serve and joins the Rebel Alliance. He shares the callsign Rogue 9 with Barlin Hightower at the Battle of Hoth. Their speeder is shot down. McKintay survives the crash but is captured by Imperial troops. He is able to eventually escape and returning to the Rebel Alliance. Barlin Hightower also survives the crash. He would find his way back to the Alliance and join Rogue Squadron as a pilot. He'd eventually retire from active duty. He would serve as an inspiration for aspiring pilots that he started in a support role but became a roster pilot. Karan Horn served as Rogue 9 in the era of the New Republic. He was an accomplished ace pilot known for taking down the Emperor's best pilots in their elite TIE interceptors. He was thought dead for a while but made his way back to continue the fight. He would also become a Jedi Knight under Skywalker's New Jedi Order. Even with this rare achievement, his exploits as a pilot are foundational in his legend. Uriel Krieg is a Gand Findsman. The Findsman had their own unique connection to the Force, which serves him well as a pilot. At first, he was the replacement pilot for Rogue 9 when Karan Horn was otherwise occupied. When Karan left the squadron officially, Krieg takes the callsign permanently and fights well into the war with the Yuuzhan Vong. Zek is yet another Force-sensitive pilot who would fly under Rogue 9. He joined a late version of Rogue Squadron in ABY 40, all the way into the legacy of the Force era. At the time of his service, Gavin Darklighter is Rogue Leader. Rogue 10. Taran Datch pilots a speeder on Hoth with Hoshin Hune as his gunner. His speeder was shot down, but he survives the ground war and switches to piloting a GR-75 transport ship to flee Echo Base. In a fun twist of fate, maybe the Force, Datch would remain an Alliance pilot through Endor, where he was flying a transport ship. Wedge Antilles would save his ship during this conflict. Though Rogue Squadron was flying as Red Squadron for this war, I see it as a full-circle Rogue moment. Hosh Hune was actually a mechanic. The Rebel Alliance was short-staffed and needed a gunner, so he stepped up. Sadly, he was killed when the snowspeeder flying as Rogue 10 was shot down. He's remembered by his wingmates and friend Keir Santage, who flew a Y-wing at Hoth. Noara Ven joined the newly formed Rogue Squadron, originally filling in as Rogue 4, but moved to Rogue 10 as his permanent roster slot. His career started as a lawyer. Those skills actually carry over to his piloting career when he's able to keep a level head, calm, and logical demeanor in combat. He was badly injured during the Battle of Coruscant, which retired him from flying combat missions. He would serve as the squadron's executive officer under Taichu Selchu before returning to law, where he would then represent Starfighter Command. Iniri Forge joins the Rogues after the death of her sister, Lu Jane. She was granted a probationary role due to a troubled past. With some guidance from Antilles, she earns her roster slot as Rogue 10 and eventually Rogue 11. She serves for decades as a skilled pilot and instructor. Rogue 11. Tank Lensu flies as Rogue 11 at Hoth. He and his gunner, Jek Puglio, were at an outpost when the Empire's attack began. They got to the fight late, but engaged the enemy all the same. Unfortunately, they were shot down and killed. Peshk Vrisik, and I hope I said that the same way that I did earlier, these names are insane, was a Bothan pilot who started their Rogue Squadron career as Rogue 11 before being reassigned to Rogue 2. We already covered his death. A bit more context on that was that he was taking unnecessary risks to try and outcompete a wingmate. The squadron as a whole would take this lesson to heart and put any petty differences and rivalries aside so that this kind of needless thing doesn't happen again. Asir Sylar was another Bothan pilot flying as Rogue 11. She'd eventually move to Rogue 12. Her piloting and espionage skills are crucial for taking down Yasana Sard. Tahiri Vila is a Jedi Knight who flies with Rogue Squadron against the Yuuzhan Vong. She takes up the callsign to fill a vacancy when the main Rogue who was assigned to this slot was injured. She wasn't a natural pilot, but tried hard and tapped into her connection to the Force to make up for her seeming lack of piloting skills. She would quickly return to Jedi duties, but it's a nice moment of unity between the Republic and the New Jedi Order that did their best to keep out of politics. I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. Today's video is sponsored by me. Imperial Remnant now has a merch store, and it's not just designs specific to the channel. I'm working with a couple talented artists to bring you unique Star Wars themed designs. Check out the link in the description. Alright, back to the lore. Rogue 12. Dash Rendar actually flies with Rogue Squadron on Hoth. He's the hero of the incredible Shadows of the Empire multimedia endeavor. Rendar was a last-minute volunteer. He wasn't given a gunner, but still managed to take down an AT-AT walker by himself. His time with the squadron was just for this individual battle. Joinsler is a strange entry on the roster. He was a stormtrooper that defected from the Empire and joined the Alliance. He would sacrifice his life on a mission to save his new allies from an ambush. Alima Rar is a Jedi who joins the Rogues to help take on the Yuuzhan Vong. She's a skilled pilot with her connection to the Force, but the cost of war drives her down a darker path, and she eventually would have to leave the squadron. I hope you learned something from this rapid-fire transmission about Rogue Squadron in Canon and Legends. For more on Rebel pilots, check out this transmission next.